The family Bible was open across my mother's knees when the attorney explained that the house would be transferred to Logan. Not someday. The paperwork was already moving. The house, the 2 acres behind it, my father's restored Chevy, my mother's jewelry, everything they had ever called family property was being placed under Logan Pierce's name. I sat across from them in a leather chair that squeaked whenever I shifted. My mother kept one hand on the Bible, like that made the decision cleaner. My father stared at the floor. Logan leaned back beside them, calm enough to look bored. Nobody looked at me. The attorney kept speaking in that neutral tone people use when they know a room is about to turn ugly. There were 19 days before the title transfer would be recorded. I didn't argue. I didn't ask why. I didn't give Logan the satisfaction of watching me lose control. I just started doing the math. 5 years and 8 months of mortgage payments. Property taxes. Electricity. Homeowner's insurance. My mother's medical copays. The monthly wine box she liked enough to expect, but never enough to thank me for. By the time the attorney closed his folder, I had already reached a number somewhere north of $100,000. And I understood something I should have understood years earlier. They trusted me to keep the house standing. They just never intended for any part of it to belong to me. My mother finally looked over and said, "Mason, you understand why we're doing this, don't you?" I looked at Logan, then at my father. "Yeah," I said. And in that moment, I decided they would not know what that answer meant until the next payment failed to arrive. My name is Mason Reed. I'm 35, single, and I manage facility operations for a regional hospital system outside Briar Glen, Pennsylvania. It isn't glamorous work. Nobody raises a glass at Thanksgiving because you kept 6 buildings compliant, replaced a failing boiler before winter, or found room in a budget that was already bleeding. But the work is steady, the pay is good, and I've always been the person people call when something needs to keep running. Logan Pierce was 37. He was my cousin, technically. My mother's older sister died when Logan was 12, and my parents brought him into our house before the funeral flowers had fully wilted. At first, I didn't resent him. He had lost his mother. I still had mine. Even at 13, I understood the difference. What I didn't understand was how temporary sympathy could slowly become permanent replacement. By high school, my father kept Logan's varsity football photo on the living room mantel. My community college graduation picture stayed in the envelope it came in. My mother introduced Logan as the one who brought life back into the house. She introduced me as our practical one. At family dinners, Logan's stories became announcements. Mine became updates people listened to while passing food. When he got promoted to regional sales manager, my father opened a bottle of bourbon he had been saving for years. When I was promoted to oversee 3 more hospital sites, my mother said, "That sounds stressful." Nobody said they loved me less. They didn't have to. Families rarely announce who matters most. They show you in photographs, in praise, in who gets forgiven, and eventually, in whose name they put the house. For years, I told myself Logan needed more because he had lost more. Sitting in that attorney's office, I finally understood the part nobody had said out loud. They hadn't been helping him recover. They had been choosing him. The payments started 5 years and 8 months before that meeting. My father had retired early after a back injury, and the pension he expected turned out to be smaller than the number he had built his plans around. A few months later, my mother's arthritis treatment changed, and the new medication cost nearly $400 every month. They never directly asked me to take over. My mother just mentioned the mortgage twice during dinner. My father complained about the insurance renewal. Then both of them went quiet in that practiced way that made the solution feel obvious. So I set up the transfers. Mortgage on the 2nd. Electricity on the 8th. Homeowners insurance every quarter. Property taxes twice a year. I even kept paying for the monthly wine box my mother had signed up for during a vacation and later claimed was too complicated to cancel. I never announced any of it. I thought helping without being asked made it mean more. Looking back, I had been trained for that role early. When I was 11, Logan and I both wanted the same mountain bike. My father bought it for him because Logan had already lost enough. Then he told me he was proud that I was mature enough to understand. At 16, I worked an entire summer and bought my first car. When Logan wrecked his, my parents helped him replace it because he needed one for work. I was praised for needing less. That was how they made neglect sound like a compliment. For years, I told myself gratitude wasn't the point. Families helped each other. Real love didn't keep score. But sitting alone after the attorney's meeting, staring at the list of automatic payments on my banking app, I realized something. I had never been the son they wanted to reward. I was the son they trusted to absorb the cost. I turned off the automatic transfers the following Tuesday. I did it at my kitchen table before work, with my coffee going cold beside the laptop. The bank asked me twice if I was sure. I clicked yes both times. For the first few days, nothing happened. That silence bothered me more than I expected. I checked my phone during lunch. I checked it again before bed. Some part of me still believed my parents would notice the missing payment and call to talk about what had happened in the attorney's office. Not to demand anything. Just to ask if I was okay. They didn't. The mortgage company wasn't going to call me. My name had never been on the loan. The only reason the house had stayed current was because my money arrived before anyone had to think about it. 12 days later, my mother finally texted. Transfer the mortgage money today. No hello. No question. Not even my name. I stood in the hospital maintenance corridor reading it while a ventilation alarm beeped somewhere behind me. 4 minutes later, another message arrived. Logan says you've been distant. Is this because of the house? Asterisk asterisk. I read that one twice. They knew exactly what this was about. They just expected me to keep paying anyway. My hands were shaking when I typed the reply, but the words themselves came easily. Not my house. Not my problem. Asterisk asterisk. My mother called before I could put the phone back in my pocket. Then my father called. Then my mother again. I let every call go to voicemail. By the time I got home, there were 5 messages waiting for me. The first sounded confused. The second sounded offended. The last one was my father saying, "You don't get to punish this family because your feelings are hurt." I set the phone face down on the counter. For once, I didn't call back to explain myself. By the end of that week, the calls were coming from people who had never once asked how much I was paying. My Aunt Denise called first. She said my mother was devastated and that whatever disagreement I had with my parents should stay private. "You need to think about how this looks, Mason," she said. "People are starting to talk." I asked her one question. "Did you already know they were giving the house to Logan?" The silence lasted maybe 3 seconds. It was long enough. She finally said, "That isn't really my place to discuss." But telling me to keep paying apparently was. My uncle sent a text that said only, "Call your father. Fix this. Asterisk asterisk." Nobody asked what happened in the attorney's office. Nobody asked why I had spent years supporting a property I would never have any claim to. They weren't worried about me. They were worried I had stopped being useful. The only person who broke the pattern was Chloe, Logan's younger sister. She had moved to Ohio for nursing school years earlier and usually stayed away from family arguments. She called Thursday night while I was sitting in my car outside a grocery store. She didn't tell me to apologize. She didn't mention the mortgage. She just asked, what actually happened? So I told her everything. The payments, the meeting, the transfer documents, my mother's text. Chloe stayed quiet for a while. Then she said, I always wondered why they trusted you with every bill, but never trusted you with anything that had your name on it. That sentence hit harder than anything my parents had said. Because it was simple. And because it was true. Chloe didn't promise to confront anyone. She only said she believed me. For the first time since that meeting, I stopped wondering whether I was overreacting. I wasn't losing my family over money. I was finally seeing what my place in it had always been. I went to my parents' house that Sunday because avoiding it forever wasn't a plan. Logan's truck was already in the driveway when I arrived. Inside, he was stretched across the living room couch with one ankle over his knee, holding the remote like he had already started practicing ownership. My mother opened the door and frowned. You're late. Dinner wasn't ready. I didn't point that out. For the next hour, the conversation belonged to Logan. His new sales territory, his quarterly numbers, the expensive truck he had leased after his promotion. My father listened like Logan was explaining the future of American business instead of selling flooring materials across 3 counties. I barely spoke. Near the end of dinner, my mother set down her fork. Oh, Mason, the electric bill came in. I covered it this time, so you'll need to send me the money. She said it casually. In front of everyone. As if the attorney's meeting had never happened. As if I was still responsible for keeping a house running after they had decided it belonged to Logan. I looked at her. Why? Her expression tightened. What do you mean, why? I mean, if the house is Logan's, why am I still paying for it? My father folded his arms. My mother sat straighter. Logan leaned back and gave me a small smile. Not surprised. Not embarrassed. Amused. That smile made everything clear. They had expected me to complain, maybe sulk for a few days, but nobody had seriously considered that I might stop doing what I had always done. I pushed my chair back. I'm done. My mother's face changed. Don't be dramatic. I'm not. I walked past Logan's football photo on the mantel, past the thermostat I had paid to replace, and out beneath a porch light powered by my last electric payment. I didn't look back. That night, I opened 6 years of bank records. The bank records were still downloading when I pulled the first storage box from the back of my closet. I had kept more paperwork than I remembered. Mortgage confirmations, insurance renewals, property tax receipts, printed emails from my mother asking whether I could handle this one before the late fee hit. At first, I told myself I was only trying to understand the total. I opened a spreadsheet and created 4 columns: date, amount, purpose, proof. Then I added a 5th. Who benefited? Every line said the same thing. My parents. The house. Eventually, Logan. I worked until after 2 in the morning. The apartment was silent except for the clicking of my keyboard and the refrigerator switching on behind me. By the time I stopped, I had documented more than 68 months of payments. I wasn't looking at isolated favors anymore. I was looking at a system. The next morning, I called Marcus Bell, one of the senior operations managers at the hospital. Marcus had spent 2 years fighting over property after his divorce, and he was the only person I knew who had ever mentioned hiring an attorney without sounding ashamed of it. I gave him the basic version. He listened, then said, "Don't call a general practice lawyer. You need someone who handles property disputes and financial claims." He sent me Dana Whitmore's number before we hung up. Dana's office was above a pharmacy in downtown Briar Glen. No marble lobby. No receptionist offering bottled water. Just a narrow waiting room, 2 filing cabinets, and a framed law degree hanging slightly crooked behind her desk. She spent nearly an hour reviewing my records. She didn't tell me my parents were cruel. She didn't say Logan was a parasite. She just kept turning pages, marking dates, and asking precise questions. Were these payments gifts? No. Did your parents ever say they would repay you? No. Did you believe you would have some interest in the property? I believed I was helping maintain a family home I would eventually share. Dana leaned back. That distinction matters. She explained that the law did not automatically refund money simply because a family relationship ended badly, but years of traceable payments toward a specific property, followed by an attempt to transfer that property to someone who had contributed almost nothing, could support a claim for unjust enrichment. Possibly an equitable lien. Maybe more, depending on the documents. What does that mean in plain English? I asked. It means you may be able to stop the transfer until they address what you put into the house. That was the first moment the situation changed shape. Until then, I had thought I was proving that I had a right to be angry. Dana was telling me I might have a right to be paid. She also warned me not to expect the law to repair the relationship. Evidence can force people to negotiate, she said. It cannot force them to understand what they did. I looked down at the folders covering her desk. I stopped waiting for that. Dana nodded once. Good. Then we build the case around what you can prove. When I left her office, I was carrying the same records I had brought in. But they no longer felt like memories. They felt like leverage. Dana brought in a forensic accountant the following week. His name was Adrian Cho, and he worked out of an office 2 floors above hers. The walls were covered with certifications instead of family photographs, and every item on his desk sat at a perfect right angle. I handed him the storage box, the spreadsheet, and a flash drive containing every statement I could download. He opened the first folder and scanned 3 pages. These transfers always went out on fixed dates. Mostly. And they were tied to the same mortgage account. Yes. He nodded as if I had just given him good news. Then this should be clean. It took him 11 days. When Adrian called me back, he had compressed nearly 6 years of my life into a report that was 11 pages long. The number at the bottom was $112,947.38. Mortgage payments, property taxes, insurance premiums, electric bills, medical co-pays my mother had asked me to cover, and 29 months of a wine subscription that nobody had ever bothered to cancel. I had estimated the total before. In my head, it had always been around 100,000. Seeing the exact number was different. It made every quiet favor measurable. Every time I had postponed replacing my car. Every vacation I had decided was too expensive. Every month I had told myself that helping them mattered more than building something of my own. Dana tapped the total with her pen. This is not a family misunderstanding anymore, she said. This is a documented financial benefit tied to a specific property. Before filing anything formal, she recommended mediation. She said it would show that I had made a reasonable attempt to settle before asking a court to interfere with the title transfer. My parents agreed after their attorney advised them to. Logan came because the house was being transferred to him. The mediator was a woman named Evelyn Hart, who had spent nearly 20 years handling property and family disputes. She seated us around a round table in a conference room with soft lighting and a bowl of untouched peppermints in the center. My mother spoke first. She said she couldn't believe I had put a price on everything they had done for me. I asked her what exactly she thought the $112,947 represented. She didn't answer. Instead, she said, "Family doesn't keep receipts." Dana slid Adrian's report across the table. Apparently, one member of this family had to. My father stared down at his hands. Logan stayed quiet until Evelyn asked whether he would consider repayment or an ownership adjustment. He leaned back and said, "I don't see why I should lose part of the house just because Mason chose to help them." The room went still. Not because he had raised his voice. Because he had finally said it clearly. My money had preserved the house. His reward was getting to own it. Evelyn gave him one more chance. "Do you believe it would be fair for Mr. Reed to receive nothing?" Logan shrugged. "They trusted me to keep the house and the family." I looked at him. And what was I doing for the last 6 years? He had no answer. The mediation ended without an agreement. Outside the building, Dana told me formal pressure was now the only thing likely to move them. I looked back through the glass doors and saw Logan laughing at something his attorney had said. That was when I stopped hoping they might choose to be fair on their own. Dana sent the demand letter 3 days after the failed mediation. It listed every documented payment, the exact total of $112,947.38, and the legal basis for placing an equitable lien on the property. My parents and Logan had 2 choices. They could negotiate repayment before the title transfer was completed, or Dana would file a formal claim and a notice against the house that would prevent Logan from receiving a clean title. The letter went out on a Thursday. By Tuesday, my parents had hired a property attorney named Franklin Boyd. Dana knew him. "He's competent," she said, "and he's probably already told them this is not going away." The calls changed after that. My mother stopped sounding angry and started sounding frightened. Her first voicemail began with, "Mason, we're sorry you feel excluded." Less than a minute later, she was accusing me of humiliating them and trying to take away their retirement. It was the kind of apology that required me to accept all the blame before it became valid. My father left one message. He said nothing about the house. He only said, "Your mother hasn't been sleeping." Neither had I. Logan texted me that evening. "Really, man? Over money? Asterisk asterisk." I read it in the hospital parking garage after a 14-hour shift. For 6 years, my money had apparently been family support. The moment I asked for it back, it became greed. I didn't answer. The next morning, Dana called with the deadline. The title transfer was scheduled to be recorded in 19 days. If we did nothing and the house passed into Logan's name without a claim attached, recovering anything later would become slower, more expensive, and far less certain. 19 days. I started waking up at 3 in the morning doing calculations I had already done. Legal fees. Court deadlines. The number of relatives who would stop speaking to me. How long I could keep hearing my mother cry before I apologized just to make it stop. One night, I called Marcus. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he said, "You already know what you're going to do. You're just waiting for someone to tell you that protecting yourself doesn't make you a bad son." 6 days before the deadline, Logan called me directly. His voice was calm, almost friendly. He said he wanted to resolve things man to man before the lawyers destroyed the family. Then he offered me $25,000 if I withdrew the claim and kept the agreement private. A goodwill payment, he called it. I stared through my windshield at the rain sliding over the glass. The offer wasn't generosity. It was proof that he knew I had been wronged and hoped I was still desperate enough for acceptance to settle cheaply. "I'll tell Dana you called," I said. His voice hardened. "You really need a lawyer to talk to your own family?" "No," I said. "I need one to protect me from them." I hung up. 2 days before the deadline, I sat across from Dana and signed the filing authorization. My hand was steady. "File it," I said. And she did. The settlement meeting happened 9 days after Dana filed the claim. My parents sat across from me in Dana's conference room. Logan was beside them with his arms folded and his jaw locked tight. Franklin Boyd sat between them and a stack of legal pads. Dana placed Adrian's 11-page report on the table. Then she walked through it line by line. Every mortgage payment. Every tax bill. Every insurance renewal. Every transfer tied directly to the house Logan was about to receive. Without Mason's contributions, Dana said, this property would not be in its current financial position. He is not asking for a gift. He is asking to recover money he can prove he spent. Logan pushed his chair back. "This is insane. He's trying to bleed us dry." Franklin turned toward him. "He is asking to be repaid for documented expenses." The words came from Logan's own attorney. That seemed to shake him more than anything Dana had said. My mother's voice was quieter than usual. "We thought you understood. The money was just what family does." I looked at her. For almost 6 years, that's exactly what I believed. She opened her mouth, but I kept going. I just didn't realize it only counted when it was coming from me. My father had barely moved during the entire meeting. Then he looked at my mother. "I told you we should have fixed this years ago." He didn't say it to me. He said it like he was finally admitting the truth to himself. Logan stared across the table. "You're really going to take money from them over a house?" I held his gaze. "No." I tapped the report. "I'm taking back the money that made your house possible." For the first time since this started, Logan had nothing to say. Adrian had stayed for the meeting in case anyone challenged his calculations. Just as Franklin began discussing possible repayment terms, Adrian opened a second folder. "There's one more issue," he said. While reconstructing my parents' finances, he had found repeated transfers to Logan over the same 5-year period. Some were checks. Others were direct deposits. My mother had labeled nearly all of them as business loans in an old financial ledger. The total was $41,600. Adrian looked toward Franklin. "There is no record of repayment. Not one payment." My mother's face drained of color. My father closed his eyes. Logan stared at Adrian as if silence might make the folder disappear. For years, my parents had told themselves Logan needed support while I was capable of taking care of myself. But the records showed something uglier. They had been using my money to protect their house while sending their own money to the man who would inherit it. Franklin removed his glasses. "I believe we should discuss settlement terms." Logan turned toward him. "You're supposed to represent us." "I am," Franklin said. "That includes telling you when continuing will make your position worse." The agreement took another 2 hours. Logan would refinance the property into his own name. Part of the new loan would be placed into escrow and used to reimburse me for the full documented amount. No reduced offer. No goodwill payment. $112,947.38. The transfer was completed 14 days later. I was sitting at my desk when the deposit appeared in my account. I checked the number twice. Every dollar. Every cent. I didn't call my parents. I didn't send Logan a message. I simply closed the banking app and returned to work. For once, being made whole didn't require me to make anyone else feel better about it. Word spread through the family faster than I expected. This time, the numbers traveled with it. Aunt Denise called and apologized. Chloe had shown her the report, and once the total was written in black and white, there was no way to pretend I had abandoned my parents over one missed bill. A cousin I barely knew texted, "Good for you." Logan sold his leased truck 2 months after the refinance. The new mortgage payment left no room for the image he had been building. Nobody mentioned it directly, but everyone noticed. Thanksgiving was held in 3 separate houses that year. I used the settlement as a down payment on a small 2-bedroom place 45 minutes away. It had an unfinished garage, a narrow backyard, and my name alone on every document. Months later, Logan sent one final message. "Hope you're happy. You ruined everything. Asterisk asterisk." I read it while unpacking a box of my father's old tools. They were the only things I had asked for during the settlement because nobody else wanted them. At the bottom was his old carpenter's level. I hung it on a nail above the workbench, stepped back, and watched the bubbles settle perfectly between the 2 lines. Then I deleted Logan's message. For most of my life, I had paid for a place where someone else was chosen to belong. Now I was standing inside a home that carried my name, held my things, and needed nothing from me except to live in it. For the first time, that was enough. And no one could take that away. CTA. If you've ever been treated like family only when someone needed something from you, tell us where you finally drew the line. Subscribe to Quiet Verdicts for more stories about betrayal, consequences, and the moment silence finally ends. Disclaimer. This story was created by the Quiet Verdicts team for entertainment purposes only. Do not imitate it or treat it as legal advice.